Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet. As we approach the 2024 US elections, it's increasingly evident that 7 key swing states are likely to play a pivotal role in determining the outcome of these elections. In this battleground state, voter support levels tend to be closely matched, making them highly competitive. Trump, Harris and their VP picks have held more than 300 events in these areas leading up to the election. Well, ultimately, the decisive factor will be which party can effectively sway the undecided voters in these crucial regions. Let's take a closer look at these important swing states now and the statistics behind them as well. We'll, of course, get in a couple of perspectives after I have shown you what this particular process looks like. Of course, these are some of those states which can define. Arizona is a big one. In 2020, Biden won the state by 10,000 votes. All right, in elections and in electoral parlance, that is not a very high number. And this is how people voted. The Caucasian vote towards Joe Biden was 52.9%. The Hispanics, which of course are in contention and of course in a lot of controversy at this point in time, are also at 32.5. Electoral votes, 16 out of 538 in North Carolina, another important state on the East Coast. Trump won this vote by 34,000 votes. And that, of course, is quite a margin there. Moving on, North Carolina, another important state. The Caucasian vote, which is the white vote, was at 60%. The Hispanic was at 10.7%. The black was at 20.2%. And the Arab at less than 1%. The Asians at 3.2%. The others voted by 5%. The immigrant population in this state is about 1 million people, and 10 out of 538 electoral votes was to Wisconsin as well. In 2020, Joe Biden, the incumbent president of America, won by 21,000 votes, and this state, a coal state, has a population of about 6 million. Wisconsin, another state, has a population of 5.9 million. The immigration population is not that high at 308,000. And of course, again, the Caucasian vote here was at 74.5%. The Hispanics at 8.6%. The black at 10.8%. The Asians, Native Americans, and of course, Native Americans mostly consolidated in this part, in this state, is in Wisconsin. And of course, 19 out of those 538. Joe Biden, 82,000 votes in Pennsylvania, another important state in the northeast of the United States, and this is how they voted for Joe Biden. The Caucasians once again comprised 3/4 of this vote at 74.5%, a very densely populated state. Pennsylvania at 13 million of population. The black vote was at 10.8%, the Hispanics at 8.6%, and Native Americans and the others at about 4%. A huge immigrant population of 1 million people in this state. The electoral 16 of 538 in 2020, Joe Biden won Georgia by 13,000 votes, a population of 11 million people, and of course another important blue state where the Caucasian population does have a big say, but they only comprise 50% of the voting percentage for the Democrat leader, which is Joe Biden, the incumbent president. The Hispanic, the Latino, the Asians, the Native Americans, the Arab and the blacks, of course, followed next. The black vote at 32.6% for Joe Biden in Georgia. And this is, of course, the road to 270, which is going to define who's going to win. Another important state, Michigan, a coal state with Detroit as the capital. Joe Biden won by 150,000 votes, a big margin for the Democrats, and Michigan is considered to be predominantly an area where the blacks, of course, exercise their right to vote and usually have not been undecided when it comes to voting for either the Democrats or the Republicans. The way it has swung in the past has always been for or towards the Democrats. And Hispanics constitute about 18.7% of this pie chart. The Native Americans, the Puerto Ricans, and the Arabs and the other constitute somewhere close to less than 10%. Nevada, another important state right next to California. This is the home to Las Vegas. Joe Biden won by 34,000 votes. It's got a population of 3.2 million. And this is important to understand, as these are smaller margins, and these are the margins that will decide who's going to be the next president of the United States. We are going to, in fact, going to get more ideas about what these margins mean for both these candidates, and how is it going to impact the last minute rush to the polling booth. And we're going to talk about this with Cleo Pascal, who's a non-resident senior fellow, Foundation of Defense of Democracies; Varun Nikore, AIPI Victory Alliance Executive Director; Mr. Bob Lancia, former Rhode Island House of Representatives, District 16, also joins us on the program. All right, Cleo, I'll begin with you. Thank you for being with us. Once again, I don't know where you are right now, but it's right there. This is going to be an important race for both of these candidates. And as we know, this is perhaps the most palpable situation when it comes to swing states that we have ever seen when it comes to two candidates. There's not been so much uncertainty. Celebrities like Jennifer Lopez, Beyonce, and Megyn Kelly have been pulling in all their fan base, all their podcast viewers, trying to get votes for their favorite candidate. And this has been going on till the last minute, something we haven't seen before. Even Bruce Springsteen threw up a surprise there in favor for Kamala Harris. Where do you think this is going to go for either of the candidates, and who has the most probable chance of capitalizing on these swing votes, considering the fact that Joe Biden made a huge gaffe against the Puerto Rican community, which was very duly and intelligently capitalized by Donald Trump and his son, by riding that dumb truck?
Yeah, it's been quite the campaign. I'm actually just outside of Washington, D.C. I can see the monuments from where I am. It has been extraordinary, and I think probably the endorsement that's been the most important in terms of celebrity endorsements would be the Joe Rogan one, which just came out, because that targets very much the swing voters that you're talking about, which are the ones that may not be affiliated with either party.
That endorsement came, Cleo, because Kamala Harris refused to go for his podcast, and instead she went to Shannon Sharpe.
Yes, and that's being seen as an indication that she's not willing to put herself forward. I mean, among his viewers, to an actual conversation, whereas Trump sat down for 3 hours and basically said, "Ask me anything." So for that kind of a voter, that Joe Rogan kind of a voter, that's a very important indication for them of the sort of person that they want to vote for. It was a smart move by the Trump campaign, and it was an unfortunate move by the Harris campaign. But it tells you who they're going for. And these it's interesting to see the demographic breakdown, because traditionally, as you said, the demographic breakdown would be indicative. But you're seeing not a Republican Party vote, but a Trumplican Party vote, a vote for a very different kind of leadership within the Republican Party. And so I think the stats now are about 40% Hispanic vote for Donald Trump, maybe about close to 25% of the black male vote for Donald Trump. These are factors that wouldn't have gone into the calculus previous. So it's a very dynamic, and we should actually know pretty soon how states like Pennsylvania are going, and that will potentially give an indication for some of the other states as well. You're
absolutely right. And Bob, the division, or perhaps, the for the lack of a better word, the gulf between the blues and the reds this time appears to be, less dramatic as it did way back in 2020, when it was perceived that, the Americans were very divided because, of course, Donald Trump, pulling no punches, accusing his opponents for rigging the elections. Has that, that oratory died down, or do you think Donald Trump is once again going to bank on it if he loses? Bob, that's for you. Okay, Bob's not there with us. All right, Varun, can I throw that question to you, please?
Yes. Hi. Good to be with you. I think what we're seeing in this election is not only the extreme rhetoric that Donald Trump had exhibited since he first started running in late 2015, but he's doubling down, in fact, tripling down on that extreme rhetoric. I think there's a lot of concern, frankly, over his cognitive abilities And I think one indication of that is on many of these campaign stops, his family is not even really traveling with him anymore. His daughter, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, they're not involved in the campaign like they had been prior. And so I think what we're seeing, frankly, is a lot of concern even within the Trump camp. There was a expose article that was just released in the last day or two. Tim Alberta from The Atlantic had written sort of a behind the scenes piece about all of the internal calamities in the campaign, the doubling down, the tripling down, if you will, on the nativist rhetoric, the extreme language. The campaign had tried to rein him in, but it still resonated, and he doubled down. They made so many unfortunate, unforced errors in this election. A lot of times I was sitting there wondering if they're purposely trying to lose this election. You can't, on one hand, try to court key constituencies, Blacks, Latinos, Asians, etc., by denigrating them in the same sentence that you're trying to court them. And so we've seen time after time again where this campaign has made more unfortunate errors when in fact they had intended and promised that they would be running a tighter ship, a more focused narrative campaign than they had been before. And it seems to have gone off the rails, especially we're experiencing in these late days close to the election today.
And Cleo, this is also going to be an existentialist fight for Donald Trump, won't it be? I mean, what happens to him, if he loses? What happens to the Republican Party, who has been scrambling for a face, who's been scrambling for a leader, in the shadow of Donald Trump? And what about Donald Trump and those 33, if I'm not mistaken, cases against him and charges against him? What really goes down if Donald Trump loses? Of course, everybody's worried that he's not going to admit to losing this battle. He's going to be charging the Democrats for rigging the elections. Where does that put this entire election at? There is a danger here as well.
Sure. So those are a few different questions. In terms of the transfer of power, I mean, he did it once before, and he did transfer peacefully power when the time came to do it. So I'm not sure, and I think that if there had been the appropriate number of National Guard on the Hill on January 6th, things would have come out differently. I don't want to be in a position, I'm a reporter, so I don't want to be in a position to sound like I'm just defending one side. But it is helpful to kind of get some of we tend to get into these fact ecospheres and not hear about other sides. So, for example, I would highly recommend people go and listen to what the Somali leaders in Minnesota said when they endorsed Trump, if they want to get an idea of some of the interesting things that are happening on the ground. If you're worried about his cognitive abilities, then watch the 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan and see how he held up with that. I think that really there's been a lot of reporting about the reporting, and people get stuck in their own little groupings, and it's very worthwhile going to some of the primary sources and listening to some of the people you might not expect and hear how they see things playing out.
Okay. Varun, let's also look at some of the agendas that both of these have fought for. Whoever is going to become the president, they are going to be, in fact, getting into a situation which is not good in terms of geopolitics. They'll be looking at two wars, which started in the last few months or years. Of course, we're talking about Ukraine and Israel. Donald Trump has always taken confidence in the fact that when he was president, there was no fighting happening anywhere in the world, and he's also gotten Vladimir Putin's endorsement that if Donald Trump does decide to talk about this war getting over, then he will take Donald Trump's advice very, very seriously. So that is, of course, something that has gone for Donald Trump in his favor, running up in the last minute to these elections.
Well, I would love to just briefly comment on that and maybe pivot more to the domestic if I could, because that's in the end of the day what is going to determine this election. in a number of hours, hopefully tonight, which is, and if I could slightly correct you, the U.S. was involved in Afghanistan under Trump's watch. So there was technically a war. Now, for the first time, there is no U.S. presence in any war in overseas. And so while there might be the Russia-Ukraine war currently going on, the U.S. is not directly involved with troops on the ground. So I'll just leave that at that. But just, I think, at the end of the day, what the American people say that they wanted in survey after survey after survey is a focus on domestic issues. International ranks way at the bottom. It may not even register in the top 10. And so what I think we really need to kind of focus on are those points that I believe both candidates have been speaking about ad infinitum on the campaign trail, which is the cost of goods, inflation, obviously, the economy, jobs, growth, et cetera. And then, of course, what we are seeing and exhibiting probably is going to be a high watermark tonight in terms of the number of women that are voting. We've seen one of the largest gender disparities, not only in terms of interest level, but in terms of voting, than we've seen probably in close to several decades. And that is, at the end of the day, what are these women saying that are exhibiting and being part of this surge? They're saying that they want their rights protected and that they will penalize people at the ballot box who do not want to protect their rights, right? They say that they want access to health care and abortion, and that is why they are turning out in droves. They are saying that they want this economy protected. And what we've seen over the last several weeks as we get close to this election night tonight is that the disparity between both candidates in terms of who will be better for jobs, the economy, inflation, we're close to parity now. I believe Harris is still a touch behind, but at the end of the day, I think several leading indicators that despite James Carville's famous statement from decades ago, it's the economy, stupid. What we've seen since essentially the Supreme Court overturn of Roe versus Wade in special elections where abortion was on the ballot, time after time again, people have voted to protect their rights over jobs, the economy, inflation. And so we may be seeing something completely different in this election, in that it polls
But
well
hold on to that
say
thought.
that they want.
We have some breaking news coming in as well. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has cast his ballot in Ohio. He went on to say, and I quote, opportunity to pay down debt to our country. Let's listen to what he said.
My most important message is we ought to argue, disagree about, persuade each other about politics. That's part of the natural process. But we can't discard friends and we can't discard family members. I think that if we all just recognize this basic principle that we ought to love people, we ought to be friends with people, we ought to be family members with people, regardless of their politics, that would do a lot to heal the division. I know myself, I've had a lot of friends, not a lot, I've had a few friends who have cast their friendship aside because I decided that I wanted Donald J. Trump to be the winner in the last election and in this election. I think that's a tragedy, and I'm not going to follow that example. I'd say to everybody, whether you're voting for Donald Trump or voting for Kamala Harris, remember, friends and family, that stuff is what really, really matters. We ought to be kind to one another. We ought to treat each other with respect. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do, President Trump and I, is just build the kind of country where our fellow Americans can achieve their dreams. But that's all of our fellow Americans, regardless of who they vote for. We'll take one more question.
Senator.
No, I'm not too worried about that. Look, one outlier poll doesn't change what we've seen on the ground. We feel very good about the energy. We feel very good about the early vote. But ultimately, the ball is in the courts of the American people. Today is the day. If you don't want an open border, vote for Donald Trump. If you want to get back to low inflation and affordable groceries, vote for Donald Trump. If you want to return the world to peace and stability, vote for Donald Trump. That's my pitch to voters. I really do believe that we can have a golden age of prosperity in the United States of America, but voters are going to ultimately make that choice. I don't worry about any one poll. I think that we're going to win. I really do, but ultimately the voters make that decision. election. We'll see what they think about this by the end of the day, hopefully. God bless you guys. Thank you.
All right, Trump's running mate wrapping up his statement after casting his ballot. Cleo, let me take a leaf out of what Varun also said, that, he made a very good point that this election, or every election, is about protecting your rights. And of course, when you talk about the protection of rights, there have been a number of things that both the candidates have leveraged to galvanize their own vote, be it Roe versus Wade or be it the Second Amendment. How do you think that has played out in this election?
So consistently, the polling on sentiment has been, abortion has been 3 or 4 on the list, and number 1 or 2 has consistently been the economy, specifically jobs, inflation, cost of living, that sort of stuff, and then crime and the border. So people do tend to, obviously, as he said, vote for their own interests, but the interests in this election seem to be of higher priority to the voters where it comes to economy and security. Abortion and reproductive rights, they're priority. But what the polling shows is that's not a high proportion. And in terms of the women voters, we're seeing a very high number of women voters coming out early and swayed it to the crosstabs. What that actually may mean is that they're heeding the Republican leader's call to come out early, because normally Republicans vote on voting day, but because of the leadership has been asking them to bank their vote early, you're seeing a larger number of Republican women vote. Kind of dive into the crosstabs, take a look at the actual multiple factors going into the demographics and into the reasons for voting, and not just extrapolate from past elections. This is a very, very unusual election. Trump is not a traditional Republican. You have people voting for him who haven't voted Republican in the past, but more importantly, from the Republican standpoint, you have people who haven't voted in the last 4 cycles coming out to vote. These low proposition voters, low propensity voters coming out in numbers that you haven't seen before. And this was a very targeted ground game by the Republicans to get them out to vote. So again, you need to sort of take a look a bit at a granular level to figure out exactly what's going on. This is an election like we haven't seen in a very long time.
You're absolutely right, and that's the reason why it's even more interesting. We've run out of time. Varun, Cleo, appreciate you joined us. Thank you so much. We take a short break on that note. Be right back.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.